Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the meeting today. We've got a very exciting agenda. This meeting is being held remotely due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 allows us to hold remote meetings during the pandemic because in-person meetings or meetings conducted under 13D.02 is not practical or prudent due to the ongoing health pandemic. With that, welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Robertson. We're going to start our meeting today with an update from Commissioner Grove on kind of what's the latest with the legislative session, given everybody's work previously in relation to that. So Steve, if you want to start.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Good to see you all. Happy Monday. We thought we'd just give a brief update on things at the Capitol. It's been an eventful weekend, as I'm sure you've read. We did adjourn the legislative session last night. There were, I think, major components of both the education bill and the taxes bill that were being navigated up to the wire that weren't able to get done. Those are the two big ones, along with public safety. Some pretty close agreement on taxes. I think education was pretty close too, as was public safety, but the legislature couldn't finalize it before the end of the evening. So today, the leaders are talking about a potential special session on the things that they can agree on. Many of the bills that were completed, or at least kind of had signed agreement or left the conference committee, essentially the final step before going to the floor and getting voted on, have landed. Jobs bill in particular is one where Commissioner Robertson and myself had come to agreement with our jobs chairs for those components. And there's some great stuff in the bill, some great workforce policy, some great marketing policy, some great policy for startups, and for immigrants and refugees. A lot of the things that this council advocated for. We didn't have an enormous target in the jobs bill, but I think a pretty good one. But those have been tabled until the larger deal can come through. So we're waiting to find out more about what the appetite is for further work. I think both sides are incentivized to do some more things and bring it back. Timeline will be pretty tight, I think, as most legislators do want to finish this up and get back to their districts to campaign, because of course everyone's up for election this fall. But good conversations. Disappointing it couldn't come to fruition at the end of last night, but we're in conversations to see if we can extend this just a little bit further. We are very close, and the governor is willing to do that if we can get to a place of agreement. I will say one thing that did pass the floor and will be happening for sure is a pretty big broadband package. We got $210 million for broadband, which is great news. $50 million straight away into our border-to-border grant program, which, boy, we'll get that RFP out as soon as you can possibly imagine. We're very eager to get that moving with the ground soft now. And then in federal dollars, about $160 million that came from both the infrastructure funds, but also something called the Capital Projects Fund. So a lot of that will go to broadband connectivity and line extensions. But that was a big priority of this council, so I wanted to raise that up here. So again, just thank you all for your help and advocacy. Many of you have been helping behind the scenes. And of course, the report itself from phase one was really a roadmap for so much of this. So we're grateful. It's on us to get this done, and we're working hard to make sure that we can. And I don't know, Commissioner Robertson, if you wanted to add anything, or I don't know if Commissioner Harpstead's able to get on yet. It looks like she is, but turn to you guys if you want to offer any thoughts about the state of play here near the end of the session.
I can only say ditto. Very engaging conversation, but at the end of the day, the decision to move forward was beyond our hands. So I think that we had some pretty lively conversations. Hopefully, we will get an opportunity to implement some of those great ideas. Many of the ideas, I think, are areas that this council would really appreciate. There was a lot of workforce development. And of course, you've heard no matter what sector employers or organizations have come forward. Of course, that's the biggest concern because that's how we keep our economy going. So I am very hopeful that we will get an opportunity to implement those initiatives. I think there are a whole lot of things at play at this time, but I really appreciated Commissioner Grove's support throughout the process. It was all quite interesting. We were hoping for a very, very different outcome, but I'm not giving up just yet. I think there's room. There will need to be compromise on both sides, and we've got to get through this. In the meantime, the state government is fully funded, and so we keep doing the good work that we can in hopes that a broader agreement will allow us to take this opportunity to meet some of the needs that have been so clearly expressed to us. But they're all very interesting, and I'm trying very hard to hold my head up very high today. I was hoping that I'd be jumping for joy. It's a little more disciplined and just hanging there, not taking any laps just yet, but I believe it's forthcoming. I'm hopeful.
Very good.
This is Commissioner
Go ahead.
Harpsted.
Yeah,
Are you there?
please go. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner. We can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that yesterday we were pleased that the House and Senate passed a very large policy bill that's non-budget items for health and human services that will be extremely helpful to us in our ongoing everyday work. We also saw the passage of a significant mental health bill before the end of the day yesterday. Ours is another major spending bill, in addition to the ones that Commissioner Grove mentioned that didn't get across the bridge late last night. And we are still hopeful there's an opportunity to land that and to continue to help all Minnesotans achieve their full health potential, as we like to say on our subcommittee here. So that's all for today. Thanks.
Well, thank you. The council really appreciates having those inside updates and on such a dynamic situation. And we'll stay tuned for over the next few days. I guess we'll learn when the next special session might be. So today, if you recall, we're kind of breaking out of our subcommittees and back into working as a council as a whole. One little exception to that, and Liz will walk you through it, as we prep for the town hall, we are going to be looking for people from the subcommittees who have that expertise to present out at that meeting. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Liz, and she'll walk us through where we're at with the public engagement approach and also the prep for the town hall.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. So you should all be seeing the timeline slide as our little red star moves us through this process. We are in the midst of the heavy staff review. So a couple of us have been turning away. We received 98 strategies or tactics from you all. So that's a bit of a lift to sort of synthesize and manage, but we are working through that. And but I think we are pretty close to our original plan, and a bit of a push here at the end, but I'm feeling good that we'll be able to look at a draft together quite soon. Couple of things on the agenda for today. We're going to start with this public engagement update and the kind of town hall update. So we have sort of shifted our public engagement approach a little bit to try and make it a little bit longer and not tie it so heavily to the town hall. So we have a live website, which I'll show you in a minute, that just went up on Friday. And it's basically everyone's vision statements, issues that it covers and why it matters. And then kind of a call call to email us with, there's some guiding questions and email response. So we're going to work with our various comms teams to kind of promote that and get the word out. And then I'll share the link in the chat too. And if you all want to share it with your networks or get some more broader comment, I think that's also an opportunity as well. So the purpose of that is to really give a second push, because we got a lot of input right away on that email address. So this is sort of like a second flag for that, and to meet the charge of the EO to be really engaging and have lots of opportunities to engage. And then, like I said, we'll share it. It'll be on the DEED main page. We're working on how it'll appear on the DHS site. And then we're hoping that even the Gov's office public engagement advisors will be able to spread this input opportunity out through their networks. So any questions on that before I pull up the link and show it to you all?
Elizabeth, excuse me, for this town hall, just can you clarify, I guess, this is the community asking us some questions and some maybe, I guess you would say representatives from the different subcommittees about this, right? Is the governor going to be participating? Maybe I missed that part. And I'm only asking, not trying to be selfish, but it is my anniversary, so I hope to participate, but wonder if it's one where I'm not needed or something.
Right. You're not incredibly needed, Joe. So if you want to have an anniversary fun time, go right ahead. Yeah, so the town hall is with the governor's office public engagement advisory group. So he has this diverse group of stakeholders that represent different industries, communities, thought leaders. It's like 65 people that meet on a quarterly basis. We already met with them early in this phase, and they wanted a circle back, and they're also really representative of kind of who's plugged in and who might not be as plugged in. So we're just gonna give them an update, and then, like you said, Joe, kind of host this Q&A and let them ask us questions. We don't have a lot of material planned, and so we'll just kind of follow the conversation where they take us. It's more about listening and responding. So
thank you.
So I'm just going to shift us back to this public engagement website and give you all a preview. And this just explains a little bit about our charge and how all of it fits together for economic expansion. And then these drop-down menus have everyone's vision and why this matters. So I think it's a pretty nice snapshot of where we're at so far. That's readily available for public consumption, and I think it does give enough for people to respond to. Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, for putting that in the chat. So if you all see anything or want some slight tweaks, please email me. This website we wanted to get it out, but we can certainly update it as needed. So any questions on that from people? Okay. Covered the town hall a little bit. And then here's some more specifics. So when we sent out the council email this last week, we asked everyone to RSVP by this Friday. Let us know if you can make it. And then we're asking for one speaker per subgroup to talk about why this matters and kind of the general conversation. And then just be available to chime in during the Q&A related to your section. And so it's basically, we're going to have a commissioner, co-chair, welcome, depending on who's available and who can be there. And then the PowerPoint slides will be similar to what we've shown them before. The EO charge, what came out of phase 1, and the phase 2 progress to date at a high level, and then the Q&A. So, and I think, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the town hall RSVP includes, you can say if you want to speak for your subgroup.
That is correct. If you say you plan to attend, then you're given the option of indicating whether or not you'd like to speak on behalf of your subcommittee.
Yeah, so once we have that information, we can contact people and distribute the slide deck. It will be quite similar to the slide deck that we had at our hybrid meeting. It'll just be a slightly updated version of that.
So just so you have it in one place, our business support group has already sort of exchanged emails, and I'll be the representative for our group at this session.
Great. I don't know if anyone else has had a chance to talk amongst their group, or if anyone else knows they for sure want to be the speaker. Okay. Yeah, so please fill out the RSVP survey. And then if there's no more, are there any more questions on public engagement in the town hall before I move on? Okay. So I don't know, Commissioner Grove, I don't know if you want to talk about kind of the roadmap structure vision that's emerged now that we've had a chance to look at the material that came in. I can pull up our high level outline really quick.
Sure, yeah. If you wouldn't mind pulling up, I'm happy to. I just want to make sure I can reference it a little further. So I think, we spent some time kind of looking at other states' reports. Other states have done things like this, right? Some states did some kind of really early in the pandemic responses to kind of how you should manage a pandemic-laden economy. Other states have regular clips at which they post economic plans. Other states have done this in different sequences. Anyhow, we had our team pull every state's reports together. Not that we have to copy them, but it's always good to just kind of get your reference points, right? And we spent some time looking over the format, and the chairs and the staff all kind of examined them. We've also been listening, of course, to the conversation in the council around what's here, what's missing, how we would structure this. All that to say, I think we've landed on kind of a basic structure, and I can speak to it. Maybe Liz, you can pull it up, that we think could work for the shell of this thing. So I think first, we'll have a letter from the governor just reminding everyone why he convened us, why he wants this report, why he thinks it's critical to the future of our economy. So that'll be probably a page or two, but just a kind of reminder of the work and why it matters. The preamble is something I think we've spent a good amount of time talking about, and it came up, I think, most pressingly in our in-person meeting, and we're really excited about that. And I'll say that the reports that I've read that do this always land better when you get that sense of really the urgency of the moment, meeting this moment, if you will. And so our preamble would really get to kind of the heart of why this is an inflection point for our state, why it's an inflection point for equity in particular. That seems central to what you all want to say based on a lot of our discussions, but just really trying to convey a sense of economic urgency related to equity and the need for transformation to make change happen. And I just draw on that conversation that Paul and Neil and their group brought together in our last meeting, which I thought really started to get at some of those key points around transformation and what it takes to make change. So I think that would be the idea behind a preamble, of course not written yet, but that's kind of what we're thinking about for that section. An executive summary, of course, that would just highlight the 5 vision statements and just a couple of pages highlighting the key points. But then I think the reports that are oftentimes most successful don't just dive right into the 97 strategies and tactics that Liz mentioned a moment ago, but try to synthesize, right? And try to really pull out, what's a roadmap here? What's the key how-to statements, if you will? And I think we're in the process of figuring out what that roadmap section would look like, because I think we do, again, want to synthesize the work of the 5 subgroups. But I think there's been some kind of good talk and conversation around what potential structures could look like. And Scott has lifted up the idea of a sort of economic bill of rights. Others have talked about guidelines imperative to economic expansion, 10 transformational principles to ensure we have a more resilient economy. I don't know, you can get a little bit clever with how you frame this and guide it such that it sticks in people's head. I think we just want to, again, synthesize the incoming from each of the subgroups and see what makes sense here, but a very practical kind of how focused roadmap section we think could be really powerful. And I think coming around to this theme of kind of meeting the moment, that this is truly a moment for our state that stands apart in our history that we need to rise to meet, is kind of how we're starting to think about some of the language on this. And of course, we'll put some of that on paper to get a sense from all of you if it resonates with your thinking or not, but just trying to kind of sponge in the feedback you've all given us to make sure we're getting the tone of this right is critical. And then we would go into 5 visions for the future, so the 5 subgroups, right? And here I think it's pretty basic. It matches that structure that we've had in front of us that you all created a couple months ago. The vision statement kicks it off. We have a short section describing why that vision statement matters for our state's economic expansion. And then following that kind of why of it, it gets into the issue areas that you've identified and the ideas themselves and the strategies and the tactics. And I think there's likely some variability in the existing drafts there across groups. And we don't have to make this too cookie cutter, but I think getting at those basic questions of sort of why and how and kind of moving into the practical recommendations you've all made. We quite like the fact that there's some stuff that's pretty transformational and some stuff that's like incredibly detailed and specific. That's often the hallmark of a good report, is that you have a little bit of that variability in there in terms of what's needed. And so the structure of that would come together accordingly. And then, I think a conclusion at the end, just to wrap it all together, would be great. And I think that's kind of the shape of it. I don't know, Paul or Jeff, if you want to chime in anything there. I think we're still thinking about some of the comms and marketing pieces of this too, but that's TBD. And so that was kind of our basic thoughts in the shell at this stage. Jeff, Paul, you want to add any thoughts or things I may have missed?
I'll just chime in real quickly. I thought, again, as we kind of looked at it, it felt like the right balance across all of those different areas. Again, with these reports, it's you want to be both kind of crisp and hard hitting. You also want to have some detail, but you don't want to have too much detail, so people kind of lose focus after too many pages. So I think it strikes the right balance, and I especially like kind of the roadmap and the look at the other reports that was done. I thought was really helpful to kind of see what do those better reports look like. So Steve did a great job with that.
No, I would just add I think this is a great framing. Really appreciate the ongoing hard work of the staff, and clearly, all of us on the council will have a chance to see kind of how it's looking fleshed out once we get the feedback from the town hall later next week. So I think we're in pretty good position for, still a month away before we owe the report back to the governor. So more to come.
Great. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see what has come in, and I'm excited to kind of build that narrative component of it that tells a really compelling story and also have the level of information. And I told this to our planning team last week, but I mean, really impressive work by the subgroups. Like, it was a kind of a risk moving into subgroups in the first place, but I just think the work that came out of the subgroups is really valuable and impressive. And I know it was challenging. I know it was challenging even for the facilitators to guide everyone there. So everyone should be really impressed with what came in, and I'm excited to give something back that tells a compelling story and is reflective of the things people have talked about. So yes, that is exciting. So continuing on this chain of next steps, we're continuing to organize the strategies. We're sort of honing in on some change levers that people have identified, some sort of common things like related to reducing government barriers and empowering communities. So I think we'll have some exciting framing that comes back about how we meet the moment. And we're hoping to give everyone an opportunity to review a draft, and then also thinking about how we did this in phase one and kind of where we were at this point in phase one. I think we'll lean toward having an opportunity for you all to prioritize the strategies together. I don't know it'll probably be a Microsoft form. I don't know the exact format yet. But I think we had our top priorities last round, and that was kind of effective in terms of telling our story and really highlighting what the key priorities were. So more to come on that and what that looks like. But I think it added a lot of impact to our report. And then there was another call to action in the email about sending us like inspiring quotes or data points. And thank you to those of you who have responded already. That's been really helpful for us as writers to sort of make the case and tell the story in a very community-centered way, where it's many shared voices with a similar message. So please continue to, even if you just remember like the person in the health equity that, like, we'll take anything we can dig it up. But yeah, that's been exciting and helpful for us so far. So thank you for those of you who have weighed in on that. And then the last thing I want to do, because we've had a few people contact us about the preamble. So as we move into that conversation, we made a quick Jamboard of things we've heard so far. I think Commissioner Grove, you said a few things that I would even like to add to this, like the post-pandemic economy part of it. But I think it'd be helpful for us to maybe spend the next 5 to 10 minutes sort of thinking about what else we don't want to miss and how else we want to tee this up. And then the small group that's writing the preamble will look at this and work from this. So this information is from our midpoint meeting, as well as a couple of other meetings where we've talked about the preamble. So early on, we heard acknowledge that the economic system does not serve all. We all do better when we all do better. Address exceptions to Minnesota exceptionalism, how it's not for everyone right now. Community informed, honoring the value of experiential knowledge, and data informed. Focus on results, not just good intentions. Focus on equity and how equity is really central. Really intentional use of language, and then active anti-racist language and narrative. So feel free to add more ideas to this.
So Liz, are you looking for input just verbally right now?
Yeah, and I can, if you have ideas, I can add them too, Paul.
Okay, great, because I don't know if I know how to add the little.
Oh, I'm on it. I can take live notes. That's good.
I just think a couple, and these are obviously contextual points, but I think our conversation throughout this process has just acknowledged that this is an extraordinarily critical and kind of transformative time. And in a preamble, kind of acknowledging that, both in terms of obviously coming out of COVID, right, after 2+ years, and we're not out of it yet, but are transitioning to some kind of new normal, and kind of the transformative moment in terms of the economy, both in terms of obviously the pressure of inflation, obviously related to COVID, but also in terms of the impact on disparities coming out of COVID, that in fact disparities across the board have only increased. And when we link that to how critical engaging everyone in Minnesota is to the future of our economic competitiveness in this state, right? To me, it's that combination that really is, and again, Tracy nudges me on, don't use the word critical, essential. Thank you, Tracy. Essential, right? It's an essential moment. And so I just think just acknowledging that kind of upfront and tying it to economic competitiveness is I think important.
Hi, this is Barty. I think one of the things that I guess I would say, and I think it's embedded here, but I think we're in an inflection moment where we can be thinking about what are the underlying assumptions to our current system and how can we challenge that, right? How could the roadmap help us sort of challenge some of those assumptions that have excluded people, right? That have made it a less inclusive economy or an economy that only works for some. So it just seems like there's that kind of opportunity. And, maybe it's the advocate in me, but I also hope that in the preamble, there is a call to action that exists for all people, right? Whether you are coming and reading this from the private sector, whether you are policymakers or decision makers, city, county, state, dare we wish, even our federal partners, right? I guess I just think that, like, for this to really be a successful roadmap, it's not just going to be about what this council does or what government can do, but about a whole community getting behind this effort. So I hope that there's something about that there.
This is great. Scott, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, put in a plug. A lot of the wording that I think pervades some of these topics, so unfortunately, I think brings, has a political leaning associated with it. And I just think, where possible, it'd be great that if the preamble uses language that is as open as possible to most of Minnesota. It's going to be hard to get it for everybody, but I see some language that I know that I agree with, that I also think can be, I don't want to encourage us to soften things up, but I think where we can lean on facts versus on sort of statements or headlines that are, just by nature of our current media environment and other things associated with the left, for example, that would be most of the ones on this list, or a lot of them. I think we just need to be, I don't know, where possible, I hope the writing really seeks to speak to all of Minnesota in a way that they'll be open to hearing.
Commissioner Harpstead, I see your hand is up.
Maybe to that end, another thought may not relate. I'm getting a lot of echo. Are you? Okay. I was thinking that perhaps there's a way to acknowledge that Minnesota does have a lot to be proud of. We get a lot of things right. Voted #1 in the nation for senior services a couple of years ago, and investing more in people with disabilities than almost any other state. And that we still have Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor folk not being included in all of that. And maybe using that to sort of define Minnesota exceptionalism. And while it's there's a lot to be proud of, what it can lead to is exclusion. So maybe there's a way to bridge that. The other thought I had was just that it might also be useful to remind folks of our changing demographics. People over 30 in Minnesota are 15% BIPOC, and under 30 in Minnesota are 30% BIPOC. And our children are coming along with a different demographic ratio. And that's one of the reasons we need to think about all these issues in economic expansion over the next decades.
Juhi, I see your hand is up. If you want to go next.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I would push back on the notion that, excuse me, that the language on the JAM board would be leftist language. I agree, that probably we have leftist leanings, but part of what the work of the Alliance does is shifting narrative in a way that is owned more by by the people impacted by the issues rather than the systems that traditionally create the narrative and language and tell us what is happening in the story. And so I think what I see in this preamble is wanting to reflect a different narrative, a more holistic, real narrative of the people, and not necessarily the narrative that system just wants to put out and perpetuate. And so I think that there's a difference in that.
Thanks, Juhi. Tracy and then Commissioner Grove. I think you're still muted, Tracy.
Sorry, everybody. I just wanted to say, I don't know, I'm thinking that there is a feeling of it being important to me to somehow acknowledge that human beings, people in Minnesota, however we do that, not in an offensive way, but acknowledge that we created the systems. We have perpetuated the systems. I think if we just refer to systems, it is kind of out in the ether. It's very ambiguous, and there's no acknowledgement and ownership for the fact that people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, created systems that have left others behind. Maybe simply because of lack of awareness, whatever it is, I just feel like there's some need to acknowledge that or own it in some way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this point around language and tone is important. This small point I wanted to make on this is I think where this comes to bear a lot of times in whether it's legislation or reports or grants or what have you, is this sort of greater Minnesota metro dynamic and then the equity dynamic. And I think speaking to the whole state and speaking to greater Minnesota in particular within all of this call to action and need for transformative thinking and systemic change is going to be important. A little bit drawing to the point Scott made a moment ago, but I think also recognizing, Juhi, you're right. If you want change, you gotta use change words. But I think I think that the greater Minnesota component of this will be one avenue to do this, and I think that could help us land it right.
So I'll just share that our writing group has been, because we're trying to be as direct with our language as possible. We use a lot of coded language in the way that I think we've written in the report. So that's kind of been a priority, and we're bringing in, we're kind of looking at that with a critical lens of like, how do we have really clear, plain language that isn't soft, that is direct and not coded. So, Talia, I see your hand is up.
Thanks. I think I'm going to miss you all when this is over here. I feel like we're landing a plane during this rocky storm. I wanted to point out a little bit of history of Minnesota's the history of our economy. The Sibley, Ramsey, the Rapids, St. Anthony Falls, and the fossil fuel crisis challenge opportunity that we're in. The history of Minnesota's economy is fascinating to acknowledge, sort of in the vein of the system that was created was out of imbalance, and that we are seeking some restorative practice in this particular point in history might like adjust the context of some of this language too, like where we've been and then where we're going. I appreciate the comment about how we are in like this era where things are politicized no matter how hard we try not to do it. And so thinking through it from a lens of left and right, red and blue is really a useful tool. And, my mother's accusing me of becoming a conservative because I talk about tax policy. I didn't really come from a tax policy family. I sort of came from a tax burden family, and now I'm a taxpayer person. And there's something about tax policy in this that I think would appeal to a more conservative perspective. And I say all of that, you know, owning that experience in my lifetime of being somebody who was a food bank kid, and now I'm funding them. Understanding it takes time for people to become taxpayers. And sometimes we leave out the 360-degree holistic perspective in economics, which I just think is part of bringing people together in a bigger picture. Thanks.
Oh, that was great. Tracy, is your hand still up? No, okay. Yeah, I think you're right, Talia. I'm gonna miss these conversations. Yeah, so we'll leave this link live for people if things come to you and you want to go back and add to it, or as always, you can email any of the staff. So we're hoping to convene the people who have said they want to participate in the preamble conversation after the town hall, but before the June 6th meeting. And at that point, I think we'll have more context and more to look at and respond to, and sort of see the quotes and what to emphasize and how the narrative fits together. So yeah, I think that's all that we had on our agenda for today. Any questions or closing thoughts? Expect a decent amount of email traffic as we head toward the town hall and toward wrapping this up.
Yeah, I mean, for once, we actually have a little extra time on our agenda, even after cutting it an hour short. So if there are things that have built up over the last couple meetings that people wanted to talk about and get in front of the full council, that would be fine too. But any input from anyone based on where we're at today or previously?
I'm sure that this has been shared before, but could there be a reminder of where does this all go in the end?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Liz.
Oh no, I was gonna punt it to the commissioners.
Yeah, it's a great question, Julie. I mean, I think we would love to get some thoughts from the group a little bit on this as well. We've begun to give some thought to kind of our H2 comms plan. In other words, kind of what the second half of this year looks like in terms of communications. A lot of it will come out of the session, but I think there's a desire and an eagerness to get this report out into the public as much as we possibly can. And we've obviously already asked a lot of your time, but as we come to this final month, I think it could be really valuable to get council members, in addition to having a final moment, and if you present this, of course, to the governor and to the public, to do some installations out in the community, to engage the community with the report in ways that are topical and interesting and helpful, and having the council engage in that could be really useful. So we've begun to throw around some ideas on that, because I think we want this thing to continue to live on. But, of course, as a report, it will live, on the public domain and out there in the world, and certainly inform the governor's thinking. And I think he'll want to hear us pitch it to him, and he'll want to take it in some directions based on what's in it. So not a complete answer to your question, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here based on where we land. I don't know if Jody or Rosin, if you want to add to that at all.
I would add that I always think about this going back to the Blue Ribbon Commission that I was on a couple of years ago, and certainly we want to have the report get out in the world and distribute it as widely as possible. And I think the council who's focused on economic expansion, who also has all these other things to say, is going to be a powerful statement. I also want to go back to phase 1 and remember all those investments we talked about potentially using ARPA funds for. Those kinds of reports live a long time in state government. And as we even look at budget proposals for next year, we'll be going back to look at phase 1 and thinking about what was in there that was a good idea that we may not have gotten done this year, and is it possible to put it in the budget next year, and that sort of thing. And so we're still doing that with the last commission I was a part of, and I think we will for many years to come with this one. And I just have to say also, thank you to Leah for your comment about us being together as we have been here. Relationships developed out of the last commission I was involved with and are still alive and active today. And I would hope that we would stay in touch with each other and find ways to collaborate in community after this.
Ditto, Commissioner Harpstad. I think we have a lot to be proud of, but the way I'm thinking about the work of this council is that it really serves as an opportunity to inform state government for years to come. We don't know what's coming next. Can't predict the outcome of November election, but the work of this council can inform what we do for years to come. And I think it's a really good thing. Sometimes things don't take off as soon as it lands on the paper, but I know as a state leader for the last 20 years or so, I have had opportunity. Even now, sometime I'm around this office and I find old reports, and they really are informative. I remember years ago working on Workforce 2020. And so it's the thoughtfulness of groups just like this that have an opportunity to provide support and assistance long after the work group has disbanded. So I'm really looking forward to the report. I think it will be extremely helpful, and the contributions of everybody on this work group has just been super impressive. And to give up your time so freely, I know it comes at a cost, but I feel like it's been time well spent, and I certainly have enjoyed it. I think it's a privilege to work with leaders from such diverse backgrounds, because when I look out the window, I see everything that labor and industry touch. And so I look forward to the written report, and I look forward to utilizing it, not just immediately, but in years to come.
Thanks, commissioners. An addition to, I think, our more general comms plan and the long-term elements of it. We are going to try and intentionally circle back with everyone who has provided us feedback so far when this is out in the world. I think just kind of honoring their participation. A lot of times when I participate things, I'm like, where did that ever end up? You took my input and where did it go? So we're going to try and be intentional about that. And we're going to try and document who we've talked to so far. So if you feel like if you've talked to someone and your facilitator isn't totally aware that you've talked to someone that would like a circle back, just email your small group facilitator and make sure we can get information. We can track that everyone has kind of had a follow-up after participating with us. So yeah, and then to your question in the chat, Juhi, about metrics and goals, I think we're identifying some change levers, and that might be part of our review process, is asking you all for anything that jumps out that's kind of measurable or able to be evaluated. So more to come on that. That hasn't fully landed yet either. So anything else? Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick question. Steve, you mentioned earlier the funding for broadband that had actually passed, that $200 million. What we had talked, Neil in particular, I think, had asked about what's the gap that needed to be filled to kind of complete that, to finish that off. And how does this funding relate to that remaining gap?
Yeah, it's a great question. So $50 million of the general fund went to broadband, which we can get moving right away. So in other words, $50 million of our state money went to broadband. We had asked for 170, and that was the gap in state dollars that we had. So we are short 120 million from that goal of reaching full coverage based on how we'd done the math. But the 160 that's coming and it's not all straight up for broadband access, but there's some connectivity pieces in there, there's some mapping pieces in there, and some digital equity pieces in there, is also extremely helpful. It just comes from some of those federal funds that we were using in our overall calculation of what it meant to get from here to the finish line. So it would not be accurate to say that we exceeded the amount that we thought we needed to get the job done, so to speak, but it would be accurate to say that this is the largest amount of broadband money we've ever passed in the history of the legislature, and something the governor fought for, very heavily based on this council's urging. So we're moving, but it's not that full 170. I'm glad you asked, because it's more complicated than just that one number of the overall amount.
Well, and just in terms of communications, as we get this completed, there may be some of those other investments that are worth referencing, and or policy changes, Jody, that you mentioned, that are worth mentioning in terms of other parallel important outcomes or activities that have taken place in relationship to the work of the council.
I think one of the things that we'd like to do, Paul and Jeff, is once this is fully wrapped, is to do kind of the same thing we did last fall, which was look one for one to the things the council's recommended and what ends up in the final package, and just share that with you all. So just draw the line between what recommendations are made here and what ends up in that final package. So we can do that along with some of the comms things you suggest, Paul. I think that's a good idea.
Penny, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I think it's just related to the conversation that Ed had. By the way, this is an incredible group, so I feel proud to be a part of it as well. Just wondering, related though to what was just said, there may be things that are in bills that are passed or maybe will in a special session that I just want to make sure there's no redundancies. Will we cross map our roadmap with what has been approved and already set into motion? So that we are still, timely and relevant with that. So just wondering how that process piece would work.
Right. We're definitely tracking that. It's like quickly emerging and evolving. So yeah, that's a good flag. We don't exactly know what the timing of the presentation with the Gov's office is yet, but we're working on following up with them and narrowing down a date and details. So we should have that information for you all fairly quickly. I know people's availability changes, but we should know that soon. Commissioner Hart, I think your hand is up.
You all made me just think that we should go back and cross-reference what was in phase 1 of our report with what's not been yet passed in this year's legislative session. So you can all call your legislators and ask them to finish it. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, obviously, the jury's still out, obviously, on a number of these items before the session, if it reemerges here in the next couple of days. I'm wondering, though, if in totality, let's say, okay, once that's done, I mean, at some point, yes, we had phase 1, yes, we had phase 2, and there were certain timings of things based on the governor's understanding of money and what was available and so forth. But when you kind of step back and look at the big picture, I mean, I'm not so sure it's really that important what was phase 1 or phase 2 anymore, or what was early phase 2, because we were giving feedback and there's 3 active commissioners on our group, and so that hopefully influenced some of the things that happened even after phase 1. So I do think it's more like what Commissioner Harpsted just mentioned. It's more, okay, here in the totality were the recommendations. Here's some things that the state government combined, by the time the legislative session is done, has already addressed based on some of these recommendations, and here are the things that are yet to be addressed, for our more futuristic 10-year look. At least that'd just be a thought.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You want to close this out, Jeff? I think that's all we have for today.
Great. Well, I thought that was a great extra 20 minutes. I'm glad people stayed on and were willing to contribute. Anything else anybody wants to cover? Otherwise, our next session will be the town hall, and we'll get together collectively. It's June 6th, is that right? Is the next one. So thank you all for your continued work.
Great. Thanks, everyone.